Welcome my friends, welcome back to Project AS. If you're new to my channel, thank you for stopping by. If you've watched any of my previous videos, thank you for returning to my channel. Today we're doing another Blake 7 episode review from Season 3. As always, I will point out that this review will inevitably touch upon certain plot elements of this episode, and may even reveal developments for the series of Blake 7 as a whole. So if you haven't seen this episode or anything else in terms of Blake 7, a huge spoiler alert is in order in case you wish to do a bit of Blake 7 catch up prior to watching this review. You have been warned. Right, let's get to it, shall we? Perhaps the most surreal episode of Blake 7, outside of Sarcophagus. I'm actually quite surprised that this one doesn't have two writers credited to it, one for writing the first half and one for writing the second. The writer of the first half should have been given an opportunity to write novels and other scripts for the BBC, as there is clearly the germ of inspiration there. The writer of the second half should have been fired before he had a chance to write anything else for Blake 7, like Season 4's Star Drive. The shock twist is that this episode does not have two writers, but rather only one, Mr. James Follett, who did write Star Drive in addition to this episode, and also over 20 novels, several television plays, and many radio dramas. The first half of this episode for me is absolutely absorbing. What starts as a negligible straying off course for the Liberator while its crew are playing Space Monopoly turns into an Aurak-induced falling into a black hole. Nothing more convoluted than actual space phenomena, and it's actually more deadly than all the pursuit ships combined. That's the pull of the opening 20 to 25 minutes of this episode. There are no guest characters other than this mysterious voice. We spend most of our time on the flight deck, and yet the immense black hole, the mounting situation, in spite of the bottle episode limits this episode finds itself in, to say nothing of the minute budget afforded to the visual effects team anyway, the whole thing feels huge. All we can do is be swept along with the rest of the crew. As it turns out, the Liberator is not destroyed by the black hole, nor do they exactly escape from it. The realization of the crew, and by extension us, is intriguing to behold, as outer space has gravity, and then a surface. Of a planet? A ship? A hangar? Villa is then presumed dead, but then the revelation that wherever they are has a breathable atmosphere. It doesn't sound like much, but the way it's presented and revealed makes each metaphorical turn of the page feel significant, and we eagerly anticipate the next. Or at least I did. Shooting back on themselves, Tarrant furiously demanding Aurak to tell them what everyone is asking.
Aurak, where the hell are we?
Callie's line that only leads to intrigue to wherever the Liberator's found itself.
Why not if space is curved back on itself here?
Callie, we were worried about you.
Well, I feel perfectly all right now. What's happened?
You were delirious.
I can hardly believe that.
You were raving about Tharn or something.
Why would I talk about a mythical creature from children's stories?
You tell us.
And this mysterious voice of the Tharn, whomever that is. And then we have a hypothesis from Villa that whoever brought them in there wants the Liberator for scrap. We think, no, it can't be for that reason. After everything that's been happening, it can't be as lame as that. We then go back outside and meet the Blue Peter version of a bumper car, and then we're visited by a tall imitation of the Mad Hatter.
The neuronic whip is on an automatic setting. It has only to sense one line, it will boil your brains in your skull.
Any hopes for the future of this episode are now seriously gurgling away. The anticipation is losing its zest. In fact, we might as well hit the nail on the head. Very little happens for the remainder of this episode. The aforementioned Tharn is straight out of The Wizard of Oz, and is about as threatening as a narcoleptic dung beetle with a broken ankle. That's nothing to do with his height, or even his age, just his overall presence, which is invisible. He comes across as weak, his clothing is meek, boring and beige, his head looks like he's smuggling a ball out from a bowling alley. Yes, this might have been the point, our invincible enemy is actually rather weak and vulnerable. But do we care anymore by this point? The only thing that really happens is the Liberator crew escaping, and that isn't in itself interesting, it's just something that happens. Oh, and there's the lamest of fights between Groff and the Caliph. It's actually a relief when that absurd game show lever is finally pulled down. Many other reviews found this episode totally awful. A lot of them agree that it starts promisingly and then takes a nosedive, and others aren't even that impressed with the first half, never mind the second. In fact, I remember reading a review of this episode by the Anorak, as he or she has proclaimed him or herself. For anyone who enjoys Blake 7, I would strongly recommend reading these reviews. The review for Dawn of the Gods is not particularly flattering. In fact, it actually boils down to, and I quote, "The episode is so bad that I don't even think it deserves a review, to be honest with you," end quote. Well, I have tried to review it, and it gives me a headache as to how brilliantly I think this episode starts, and how dreadfully I think this episode ends. The first half, we're talking about a 2-star episode easily. Potential for 3, maybe. 4's a bit of a reach, but I don't know, not impossible. It depends on which direction it goes in. At the end of it, I needed to be woken up. No, it's not that bad. The first half, honestly, is very enjoyable in my opinion, and the different directions it could have gone, rather than the way it did go, are limited only by the imagination of its writer, who couldn't quite keep the inspiration flowing for the second half of Dawn of the Gods. Maybe he should have consulted with a second writer? Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm heaping too much praise on the first half of this episode, but I cannot deny I was enthralled by the very mysterious, very sci-fi nature of what was happening. I don't know what the issue is that other reviewers have had with the crew playing Space Monopoly. People need to unwind, even a bunch of Federation outlaws, and I thought the Space Monopoly was a bit of a harmless, tongue-in-cheek nod to the audience and that particular board game. I thought Avon was being a bit stupid, thinking he could survive a black hole just by getting into a spacesuit I didn't know they kept on the flight deck, but I wonder if this was just more character building, an indication that Avon is still the cold, evil, self-serving sod he always has been before he became the Liberator's new leader. It also leads into Tarrant's attitudes towards Avon and his new crew as well. I thought maybe Aurak either knew there was something special about this black hole, maybe Aurak knew that they wouldn't be destroyed. He's always demonstrated a desire for self-preservation, so to plunge headfirst into a black hole doesn't make much sense, unless he already knew something about this black hole. Or something, or someone, was controlling Aurak into doing something he wouldn't ordinarily do. That would have been acceptable, and kind of ironic, if the Tharn, someone who's very anti-computers and technology, used technology to influence another technology to bring the Liberator's technology to him. Mind you, in the Season 2 episode Shadow, Avon put a bomb in Aurak which would go off if his systems varied too much, so depending on how brilliant the Tharn's technology was, he probably couldn't use Aurak. I'm going off on a tangent. My point is, whatever issues or peculiarities that arose in the first half of this episode, I expected that they would be addressed and explained, and perhaps even resolved in the second half of the episode. The fact the second half doesn't do this, of course, doesn't absolve the first half for having these issues in the first place. And that's a huge pity. Like I say, the flowing story and the mystery that is presented, it all just stops. Or at best is shown, and it really isn't anything that is even remotely interesting. Not 3 stars, and I can't justify 2 either. Guys, I'll be perfectly honest, I did actually give this a star because I seriously am that impressed with the beginning of this episode. But no, I can't give certain episodes that everyone loves only 1 or 2 stars and then give this a star as well. I'm afraid this is another no-star episode. And I do have to say that many people will disagree with the amount of praise I'm heaping on the first half of this episode. It's just that I remember how absorbed I felt by it when I first saw it. And as this is my personal list, I suppose my praise is going against every other reviewer out there to just touch the level above what everyone else has given it, which is nothing. But no, not even I can justify giving it 1 star. I obviously like it more than other people do. But for those who are yet to see this episode, be prepared to disagree with the amount of generosity I'm giving it. That concludes my review on Dawn of the Gods. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like this video, please share this video, please subscribe to my channel, and please check out my other Blake 7 episode reviews. And I fancy some boiled brain fresh from the skull. Or perhaps something less stupid sounding. Ta-ta.